get started hopefully right at 6. I'm hoping a few more people will join though. But if you have any questions for me before we get started, feel free to just talk. Okay, we have an additional person also. Hi, Kathy.
This is Lisa. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, Lisa.
Oh, so one question I had just looking over the materials. We're not doing the drawing this year of the. Oh, yay.
Yeah, we've simplified the process
Okay.
for you. That was a little complicated last year and was hard to analyze as well.
That's
so
what I heard. Yeah.
You don't
Okay.
have to worry about drawing at all.
Okay. Good. Good. And I guess the other change I see from last year is that you've done a notification already to many of the stores that we would be coming out.
Yeah, so I guess we have a bunch of undergrad students at the University of Rhode Island who are helping us out this year, and so they've been reaching out to some of the to the markets the best that they can to let them know that you guys might be coming. There are some markets that we're having a little bit hard time getting in contact with, just because the person that we need to talk to isn't there when we call or things like that. So there are chances that your market hasn't heard, but we are doing our best to get in contact with them ahead of time.
And it sounds like that's typically a phone call to them.
Yeah, we've been making phone calls.
Okay.
Cool. So it's 6 o'clock. So I'll get started, and as people join, we can add them in. So I'm Kate Masery. I'm the program director at Eating with the Ecosystem, and so we're a small nonprofit. And I'll tell you a little bit more about us in a minute. I know a few of you guys are already pretty familiar. I also want to introduce Haley. Haley's one of our URI students who's been helping us with the project. So she's also on the webinar, and she's going to be helping to answer questions. And she's also monitoring the chat. So if you guys want to type questions, you can do that, or you can just use your microphones and say them out loud so that everybody can hear them. So Haley, you just want to say hi?
Hi, everyone.
Great. So this is our second annual Seafood Market Blitz, and we are partnering with the University of Rhode Island again to run it, and we've made some changes from last year. So I know a few people may have participated in last year's pilot Market Blitz, but this year our goal is to make it simpler on you guys as participants, but also get more markets covered. So we have more market coverage, but it's also a little bit easier for you guys to actually participate. And so I'm going to kind of start by telling you a little bit about the Market Blitz and about Eating with the Ecosystem. But if you guys have questions along the way, feel free to interrupt me and just speak into your microphone. And sorry if emails come up on my screen. So the first thing just about Eating with the Ecosystem is we are a small nonprofit. We do a combination of education and outreach about our local seafood, as well as research like this Market Blitz program that we're doing right now. And our mission is to promote what we call a place-based approach to sustaining New England's wild seafood. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. Our place-based approach is really based on 5 anchors, which are kind of our principles of sustainability. And so the first one is really called proximity. And that's all about eating seafood that comes out of the ecosystem closest to you. So we want you to eat local seafood. And not just 1 or 2 local species, but we really want you to eat of different local species. And so our next anchor is symmetry. We want you to eat species kind of in proportion to their natural abundance and eat really a diversity. So there's over 100 different local species landed here in New England. And we think all of them can really be a part of our diet. And so it's really about balancing our diet with what the ecosystem is producing. And so species that are very abundant become a bigger part of our diets. Species that are not very abundant become a smaller part of our diets. And so that's where kind of symmetry comes in. The next one is adaptability. As I'm sure you guys are aware, our ecosystems are really dynamic and they're constantly changing. And so this can be long-term changes like climate change impacting species distribution. So maybe you have warmer water species coming north into our area, or it can be smaller seasonal changes, just the difference between summer and winter. You have different composition of species in our waters. And so we want you to change your diets as what's in the ecosystem changes and change with the ecosystem. The next one is connectivity. For us, sustainability is not just tied to what you're eating, but it's tied to your actions. And so connectivity is all about taking care of the habitats that produce our local seafood. Because without those, we're not going to have any healthy local seafood. And so connectivity is kind of tying the whole ecosystem in. And then the last one is community. And this one's all about kind of getting to know your fishermen and supporting them as members of your community. Our local fishermen are really knowledgeable. They're environmental stewards. They're out on the water every day and they see a lot of the changes that are happening in our ecosystems. And they're great resources to learn from. And so community is really supporting them through our purchases by eating the local species that they catch. And also supporting the businesses in our areas, like our fish markets and restaurants that are serving those species. And so at Eating with the Ecosystem, all of our work is kind of based around these 5 anchors or these principles. And our Market Blitz ties into this. So the purpose of our Seafood Market Blitz is to really understand the composition of seafood in our New England seafood marketplace. And so we ran our first pilot Market Blitz last year, as I mentioned. And the idea behind it is when people, when we're doing our work, when other organizations that do have similar missions are doing their work, no one really has information on what's actually available into our New England seafood markets. Everybody has kind of an idea that there's a lot of the typical popular items like shrimp and salmon and tuna and that kind of thing, but we have no numbers, we have no data on it. And we also have no idea how much of it is actually local. And so in order to really kind of be able to track if we're making progress with the education that we're doing, with the research that we're doing, and if we're seeing, we need to be able to see if there's changes over time. And so the goal with the Seafood Market Blitz is to run this ideally twice a year. We're going to start with running it once a year and collect the data on what's actually available in the marketplace. So we have a starting point. And then we'll be able to see are the prices of local species kind of going up as more demand for those species happen? Are we seeing more local species kind of in the marketplace over time as consumers like you guys go and ask for them? And so our goal is really just to kind of understand what's out there currently as a baseline, because right now there's not, that information just doesn't exist. Does anybody have questions on that up front? Cool. I will accept your silence as you are all set. If you do have questions, feel free to interrupt as we go along. So for the Market Blitz, I'm going to kind of walk through the steps for you guys of what you actually need to do. So the first step is, if you haven't visited our website, you want to visit the Eating with the Ecosystem Market Blitz page. This is going to be basically your resource for all the information that you need throughout this process. Our Market Blitz is going to run from March 11th through 24th, and that's when it will start. That's when you can go and visit your markets. But up until then, there's some stuff that you can do ahead of time. We're going to post the video from this training on there. So if you wanted to review it again, you'd be able to. I have typed up guidelines that kind of goes over the same information that's on the video on the website. I also have the data forms. I'll show you what those look like, but those are available on the website. Your market assignment is available on the website. So if you haven't seen that yet, you can check that out there. And so pretty much all your resources will be there. So it's a good page to bookmark to kind of return to if you do have questions. And also, if you do have questions that aren't answered there, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll try to get back to you as fast as possible. So if you haven't done so already, your next step is to check out what your market assignment is. You can do this. There's a link on the website, or you also have received an email from me that told you about this training. Within that that email, there was also a link to your market assignment. So you can access it either way. Your assignment will be on a Google Doc, on a Google Sheet that looks like this over here. What you want to do is just scroll down, and I'll show you kind of what it looks like over here. So this is what the page looks like. What you want to do is it's sorted in alphabetical order. Scroll down till you find your name, and then it will tell you what market that you're supposed to visit. If you said that you were willing to visit more than one market, there's a good chance that I assigned you additional markets. So make sure that you check and you see your name. If you see your name listed more than once, you might be assigned 3 markets, like in the case of this person here, or 2 markets in other cases. Some of you, if you said you were only willing to visit one market, then you were only assigned 1 market. And market assignments were made based on the suggestions that you gave us for the markets you would like to visit, but in some cases we had people wanting to visit the same market, or we needed other markets covered in your area, so we did make assignments that might not have been the market that you suggested. If you are not okay with the market that you got assigned, if you don't think you're going to be able to visit all 3 markets that you got assigned or anything like that, just let me know, and we'll make changes to that and we'll work with you. So if you don't feel comfortable visiting a market for some reason, just let us know. Or you don't think you're going to have time, also, just let us know. The other thing to note about your market assignments is this column here, column E. After you visit your market, it's great if you could just let us know you visited just by putting an X in this column. So we'll delete it for now, but that's helpful for us. And then the other thing is we have a special instructions column. So if you scroll down and you see that there's some information next to your market assignment, then just read that. It's sometimes tips for that particular market. So for example, Harbor Fish in Portland is a really big fish market. It has a lot of different products in it. And so for this person, we suggested that they print out maybe multiple data forms so they have extra pages to bring with them. That kind of thing. Any questions on the assignments?
This is Lisa. I had a question.
Yeah.
So to ensure that the X stays in the document, I'm thinking we go to the one that's online and it's going to save it automatically.
Yep, so it's a Google document. So you guys all have editing abilities. So if you type in, say this was your market and you typed in an X right here, it's going to say X after visiting, but just type in the X,
Okay.
and it will stay there, and it will look the exact same as on mine as it does on your computer.
Okay. Got it.
So before you visit your markets, there's a couple other things that you might want to do. One is we typed up a Market Blitz explanation specifically for the markets. It's a paper that you can print out. It's a PDF, and it's available on our website right towards the bottom. And so even if you're using our electronic data form, we still suggest printing this Market Blitz explanation and bringing the paper with you. This is something that you can give to the markets that helps kind of explain the project a little bit better. As we mentioned, we are calling a lot of the markets ahead of time to let them know that you guys might be coming. But in many cases, the person that we talk to on the phone might not be the person working at the market that day, or there's some cases that we might have a hard time getting in contact with that market ahead of time. So it's good to just have that information with you. It's also a really good resource for you to read in case the market asks you questions, so that you have answers to give back to them. One thing that we did have a few markets concerned about last year was prices. They didn't want people recording price information because they thought that it was going to be shared with their competitors or things like that. Or they thought that they didn't want people to record data because they thought we're going to judge their individual market. One thing that the Market Blitz explanation tries to make clear, and one thing that I think you guys can help make clear, is that we are not judging individual markets and we're not sharing any individual markets data. It's all going to be pooled into this one big data source, and then we're sorting it and analyzing it by state or by market type, but not by individual markets at all. And so anything that's produced won't name individual markets. Their data won't be tied to their market. And so they don't have to worry about us publishing something that that market doesn't have very much local seafood, or this market has really high prices or something like that. That won't be shared with anybody. So that's one thing that is explained in the market explanation, but it's something that you guys can help clarify for the market if they are worried at all about you collecting data there. The other thing that you might want to print ahead of time is we're going to have two options for data collection, and I'm going to go over those a little bit next. But one is an online version of the survey, and the other one is a paper data sheet. So if you are using the paper data sheet, you're going to want to print that ahead of time before you actually visit your market. And even if you're using the online version, it might be good to just print and bring a paper data sheet with you, just in case for some reason your internet's not working or something like that. It doesn't hurt to have good old-fashioned pen and paper with you. So we'll go over kind of what those look like a little bit more. So the next step is to visit your market. You want to visit your market sometime between March 11th and March 24th. So if you're assigned multiple markets, we'd like you to visit all of your markets during that 2-week time period. Once you get to the market, the first thing we want you to do is just kind of walk through the market and get a sense of what kind of products they have available, get a sense of the market itself. One of the questions that we're going to be asking you in the survey is to describe kind of the market, the type of market it is and what some of the products are. And so it's a good idea to just walk through the market and get to know it a little bit better. In the case of a giant grocery store, you might already know that market pretty well. Most Stop and Shops are pretty familiar or things like that. But in the case of especially some of these different seafood markets, especially if you've never been before, it's good to just get a sense of what's there. The next thing you want to do is find the seafood case. And this year, we are only having you record data from the seafood case. This is different than last year. So you don't have to worry about the freezer department at all. And you also don't have to worry about value-added products. So things like chowder or clam cakes or basically anything value-added, crab cakes, things like that. You don't have to record data on that this year. You only have to record the data on the stuff in the fish case, and that's basically like a pure seafood product. So something that's a fillet or whole fish. The only exception to this would be if they have like a live lobster or live crab tank. That might not be in the seafood case, but we would still want you to record that as available. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, great. So a few tips on kind of visiting your markets. One is just to choose the time that you're visiting wisely. Try to avoid going at the peak times of day when you might be in the way of other customers. So you might have to ask your fishmonger, the person behind the counter, a few questions. And it's a little bit easier to do so if they don't have a line of people trying to buy dinner. And they're a little bit more willing to answer your questions if they're not stressed or really busy. So if you are able to go at a time that's maybe not quite the peak hours, then that's suggested. If that's the only time that you can make it to your market, then go for it. And if you aren't able to ask the fishmonger questions, that's okay as well. But that's just a suggestion. The other thing is if you're familiar with your market, maybe it's a market that you visit pretty frequently and you know kind of what days they get new seafood products in or when they restock, try to go on the day when they have, the most products available. If it's right around if we've had another snowstorm, last year this happened, they're just right after the snowstorm, sometimes there's not a whole lot of products available. So try to wait maybe a few days until the weather's looking a little bit better, things like that. We like to get the markets when they do have the best selection, the most diversity out. The other tip is keep an eye out for seafood labels. Sometimes the information that you're looking for is in small font on there, and I'll show you some examples of what those look like in a little bit. And then the last suggestion is while you're at your market, a great way to thank your market, especially if they've been really kind and answered your questions, is to pick up some dinner, pick up some seafood from the market. You by no means have to, and especially if you're visiting multiple markets in the same day, don't feel like you have to buy from all the markets or buy from any of the markets. But if you feel so inspired, it's a nice way to thank the markets. So next step, once you've located the seafood case, the next step is really to ask the person behind the counter, introduce yourself, and explain what you're doing. And that's what that Market Blitz explanation form is that you're going to print out. That will help you explain the project to the market, and it's something that you can literally hand to them that will be helpful in this case. But explain who you are, kind of what you're doing, be friendly, be courteous, don't be rude in any way, especially even if they say, okay, you can't record data here, even if you already got approval, just say, okay, thank you, I'm sorry, and that, just let us know, we'll take care of it. But it's not a big deal. Most markets should be completely fine with it, and as we said, we're trying to call them all and give them a heads up. If they are really busy, as we mentioned, try to stay out of the way of other customers. But if the person behind the counter isn't too busy, talk to them, ask them questions, learn about the market itself, share information about the project or information about yourself. Interacting with the fishmonger is kind of one of my favorite parts of visiting the fish markets. They can be really interesting people and have a lot of really cool information. And so feel free to interact with them and get to know them a little bit better. So the next step is recording your data. So as we mentioned, you're going to have two ways that you can record your data. One is a paper form that is a good old-fashioned data sheet. And so you'll just need a pen or a pencil and your printed data form. And you can access that on our website at this link right here. Or the other option is to use our online data collection method, which is through SurveyMonkey. And so there's a link on our website for that as well. I'll show you what that looks like. So this is what your SurveyMonkey form will look like. And I'll kind of walk you through some of the questions right now. And these will be the same exact questions that are on the paper form. So it'll be the same. So in terms of answering them. So the first question it's going to ask you is just what market you visited. So if we visited, let's see, if we visited Stop and Shop, we'd type in Stop and Shop, if I could type, and then we'd say what city and what state it was in. So if it was in Newport, Rhode Island, we'd put Newport, Rhode Island. Then we put the approximate day that we went. So say we went, next Saturday, it was the 16th, and around the approximate time, if you spend like a half an hour there, you don't have to have it down to the minute. Just put estimated time. Let's say it was 1 o'clock. The next question it's going to ask you is market type. And so this is why I was asking you to kind of walk through the market ahead of time, get a sense of what kind of market it is. And so we've got different market types listed. One is traditional seafood market. This is has a description for it, but it's kind of what you would expect when you hear seafood market. Next one is an ethnic seafood market. We've got a touristy seafood market, cutting edge seafood market, an independent supermarket, a chain supermarket, and an ethnic grocery store. And then we also have an other category. So if you don't feel like your market fits into any of these categories, then go ahead and put other. But I suggest as you're going through, kind of read through the descriptions and then choose the description that best fits your market. And so in the case of Stop and Shop, it's pretty much a chain supermarket. And so we're just going to click that one and hit OK. This next question is only for seafood markets. So if we were visiting Stop and Shop, we would not have to answer this question. But if we were visiting a different type of market, if we were visiting a seafood market, maybe we're visiting Anthony's Seafood in Middletown, Rhode Island, we would then click kind of what other items are also the store offers. So for the example, that one actually has a restaurant attached to it, so we'd click that. Sometimes they have some sauces and condiments, we'd click that. And so anything else that market might also have, click those buttons. on the paper form, you're just filling out a little checkbox. The next question it's going to ask you is to estimate the percentage of shelf space given to local seafood. This is not based on how many different local species there are. It's based on how much space they take up within the case. So for example, if they have haddock and cod and that's half the case, then put 50%. Maybe they only have 2 species, but it takes up half the case, then put about 50%. If they have 4 different species that are local from New England, but it's only a small corner, then maybe put that it's less than 25%. If the whole thing, maybe that store only sells local seafood, then you can put 100%. So put whatever you feel like is accurate for your market. I'm just going to click 1 for now. If you're not sure, that's okay. Just estimate the best that you can. And we're basing local off of New England. So that's coming out of New England waters. The next question it's going to ask you is about your fishmonger interaction. And both this question and the next question might be a question that you want to spend a little time on, and you might not want to answer as fully while you're at the market. The way we've designed the survey is you can go back and edit this at any time. So if you want to type in a short answer now while you're at the market and then finish it when you're in your car or when you get home, you're able to go back and edit it and go back to these previous pages, just so you guys are aware. The fishmonger interaction question is just kind of describing your interaction with the person behind the counter. Were they friendly? Did they seem really knowledgeable? And that's why we're asking you to kind of interact with them. If you weren't really able to interact with your fishmonger because they were really busy, then you can put, they were nice, but they were really busy helping other customers, that kind of thing. And then one of the things that we're interested in is if you think that this market would be a good partner for Eating with the Ecosystem in the future. We have future projects that will involve fish markets. We're looking for places to partner with us, to do cooking demonstrations, to do some education at the market itself, things like that. So if you feel like it's a good market, then please let us know that. The last question on this page is field notes. So if there's any other observations that you want to make about the market that you think would be of interest to the project, or even just that would help us improve future market blitzes, then fill that box in. And as I said, you might not know that up front, so maybe you can go back and edit and answer that question after you fill in your species information. So the next thing you want to do is just hit next. That will bring you to our next page. Mine's being a little slow right now while I have the webinar running, but here we go. So this is what the species entry information looks like. And it's going to be the same for every species that you enter. So a species name, so say they had haddock, we would put haddock. Maybe it was, the origin is where is that fish from? So if it was from Gloucester, then we put Gloucester. If it doesn't say that specifically, maybe it only says USA, then you can put USA. But if your fishmonger tells you, oh, we got that out of Gloucester, we got that out of New Bedford, then put the more specific information that is available. Maybe it's not from the USA at all, maybe it's from Iceland, and you can put that as well. Most markets, including your supermarkets, will have at least the country of origin listed. If they don't have it listed, then they are able to provide that information to you. But if they don't know, you can always put that it's unknown. The next thing you want to put is price per unit. So if it was $8 per pound, then you want to put per pound. If it's something like a clam or something, maybe they have it by clam or by piece. So maybe it's 50 cents a clam or something like that. Then you want to label it that way. Just let us know what the units are for whatever price it is. The next thing is only if you're entering in shrimp. So if you have shrimp in your seafood case, which most seafood cases do have, sometimes they put them by size. So they'll have a smaller shrimp and a larger shrimp. Sometimes they'll say it's a 10 to 15 size or a 20 to 25 size or something like that. Those are how many shrimp equal a pound, or about how many shrimp equal a pound. That's what those numbers mean. And so if you do if you are recording the information on shrimp, if we're recording haddock, we wouldn't put it. But if we had shrimp here, then we would fill in that information. If you don't have shrimp, like we're filling in information for haddock, then just put NA. The little star next to the question means that a question is required. So if you don't answer it, it's gonna make you answer it until you, and it won't let you move on. So make sure you put NA if it's not shrimp. The next question is about product form. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Whole fish, if it's a whole fish, then click whole. This whole fish includes if it has a head or if it doesn't have a head, if it's gutted or if it's not gutted. Basically, if it's on the bone still, then click whole. Otherwise, we've got fillets, steak cuts like you'd see in a swordfish or a tuna, live seafood like crabs or lobsters, most of your shellfish, clams, things like that are gonna be live. And then picked meat, shucked things like scallops, or sometimes you see oysters shucked already, then you can click that. If none of those product forms fit, then click other. The next question is about kind of the condition that it's in. So if it's a live lobster or crab, again, you can click live. If it's fresh, if it's frozen, click whatever one best fits your seafood. And if you don't know, if it's not labeled that way, you can ask your fishmonger to help you answer those questions. If they don't know, then you can always put unknown. The next one is harvest method. So if it's wild caught or farmed. And then the last question it's going to ask you for your species is if it has a special sustainability label with it. So these are things that like the Marine Stewardship Council Fish Tech, MSC, or sometimes they're more specific like Gulf of Maine responsibly harvested. So it's like a local-ish label, or New Bedford seafood. So depending on where you're shopping, you might have these sustainability labels associated with your seafood. If you do have one, then click it. If you don't, then just push none. And if it doesn't fit, then just, if it's a different one than what we have listed, then just put other. If there's a more general, just like a special local label, like sometimes Hannaford markets lately have been putting local labels on their seafood, then just click that one. And then the next thing it's going to ask you is, would you like to add another fish? So this is a drop-down menu. If you click no, then it's going to end your survey for you. So you'd have to hit next, but they would end your survey and you'd be done filling it out. So if you only had one species in your market, then you'd be all set, you'd be done. But most of you are going to have more than one species. So you'd hit yes, and then you'd hit next, and it's going to bring you to, sorry. I tried to turn it off ahead of time. It's going to bring you to another page, and it's going to look just like this. So you're going to fill out the same exact information for each of the species in your seafood case. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Great. Okay. So once again, this is kind of what the SurveyMonkey form looks like. We're going to post this video, so in case you're not listening or something, you can look back at it. But you'll fill the same information out for each of the species. So the paper form is very similar. It will have a page that's the same. It'll have actually two pages in the beginning that are those same market questions, just about the market type, about what other products are in the market, that kind of thing. Same questions like we just went over. But the data entry part looks a little bit different than on the online form, but is the same information. So we've got 4 pages that look exactly like this here. They go up to 40 species. If your market has more than 40 species, then just print out extra pages and bring them with you, and you can fill out extra information. But most markets probably won't have more than 40. There's a few markets, for example, like Harbor Fish in Portland, Maine, that does have quite a diversity of products. But for most of you guys, the amount of data sheets that are included should be fine. You fill out the same way that you fill it out on the online form. You name the species, if it's shrimp, what size it is, the origin, so where it's from, price, make sure that you specify the unit. The only thing that's a little bit different is instead of listing for product form and condition and harvest method and sustainability label, instead of writing it out, we're going to have you write down the codes. And so the codes are at the bottom of each of the page. So for product form, if we were looking at live Jonah crab, then we put number 1 down. If we were looking at a fillet of cod, then we put number 3 down. So you just want to check what the codes are at the bottom, and then put the correct code in the box up here. There are a couple other categories, so if whatever you're filling out doesn't fit, then just put other and mark it that number in the box, and make sure you fill out what the other is. So here are some examples of what the seafood tags look like. We've got a bunch of different types of tags from different markets. And so each market is a little bit different. This is kind of a typical grocery store tag up here, this flounder fillet. So it says flounder. It doesn't say on here like specifically what kind of flounder it is. So that's something you might want to ask your market, and be like, hey, is this summer flounder or is this winter flounder? If they don't know, then you can just put flounder. We've got the price generally pretty clearly listed. And the name is generally pretty clearly listed on all of these tags. The things that can be a little harder to find that you need to look a little closer is the origin. So in this one, it says product USA right over here. In this one, it says Wild Atlantic right over here. In this one, it says USA, but then it gets more specific and it says Rhode Island. And so you want to put Rhode Island down. So for each of your species, once at your market, generally the tags will be the same kind of throughout the market. But if you're visiting multiple markets, it might be different at each market. They also have, if it's product of USA on one, this one over here is Norway. So they also do list other countries sometimes. And again, if it's not listed, then just like, for example, this whiting up here, it kind of looks like there's a check mark by USA, but you're not really sure. Just ask the person behind the counter and they should be able to give you that information. Other information that's useful to find on the tags is if it's wild caught or farmed. You notice right down here, it says wild for a bunch of these, but this salmon steak over here says farm raised. So that's kind of where you're gonna find that information. On this label, it's this small one over here. This one is right above the name. So there's different kind of areas on the tags that you might find this info.
Kate, I had a question. This is Lisa. So if a label says USA, should we ask the person behind the counter if they could be a little more specific, or do you think that's typically all they know?
It depends on the market. So some markets, for example, this one is Dave's Marketplace, which is a Rhode Island-based supermarket. And that one, I happened to ask them about that monkfish, and they're like, oh, it's from Rhode Island. It was caught down in Point Judith. So they actually had more information, even though it was listed as product of the USA. In other cases, the market might only have the country of origin. And so asking doesn't hurt. If you feel like they're getting kind of annoyed with you for asking too many questions and the information is there, just record the information there. But if they're willing to answer your questions, then go ahead and ask them and see if they have a more specific answer.
Okay, thanks.
Many markets are pretty willing to help you out. So if you are interested in what ones are from New England and stuff like that, they should be able to help you out. But maybe even for like tuna, this one says product of USA, but maybe it's coming from like North Carolina or someplace outside of New England. Yeah. So that's interesting to know.
So what if they answer your question by saying, it says USA, but I bet it's from Maine. So they're like taking a wild guess.
They're taking a wild guess. So that you have to use kind of a judgment call. If you feel like what they're saying is accurate, you say, okay, yeah, like there's a good chance that the haddock was landed in Maine or the lobsters were landed in Maine, then go ahead and put that down. If you feel like I feel like they're just wildly guessing and I don't know if they have much, then just put what it says as USA. So you have to make kind of a judgment call on that one.
Okay.
Any other questions on the labels? Okay. So the other thing is these examples of sustainability labels. These are labels that you might see right on the tag or on the case. So if you do see any of these are what some of them look like. So just keep an eye out for them. The next thing is sending in your data. If you're using the SurveyMonkey online form, as soon as you finish it, you hit like finished, it will send it in for you. So you don't have to worry about sending in your data. It will do it for you. If you're using a paper form, we're asking you to scan or take pictures of your paper form and email it to this email address right here. If you don't have an email, or you prefer to mail it in person, or mail it in like hard copy, then you can mail it to our PO box, and that address is also listed on the form. And both the email address and the PO box are listed on your actual data form. So if you print those out, you'll have that information, and it's also on our website. So you don't have to send in any big files or anything. Just take a picture and email them, or scan it and email it. So that's the whole thing. Does anybody have any questions?
I would just add that I did this last year, in case anybody's wondering, and I was really impressed. The markets were mostly pretty interested in the topic and were quite cooperative, and so I didn't have any serious challenges. I can understand if they're, and of course you have to be careful that you don't have a bias just because somebody's questioning you, but the reputable markets seem to think this is a good thing.
Yeah, we sent people to markets all over New England last year, and we only had I think we had a total of three markets maybe that were a little bit less cooperative, but for the most part everybody was really, and we're not sending anybody to those particular markets this year, but for the most part everybody was very cooperative and found the project really interesting. One thing that I will say, kind of as a tip, another tip, is if you are explaining the project to your market, try to leave any judgment language out of it, because we're just collecting data on really what's available in our New England seafood markets. We're not judging them based on how much local species they have, or how many different products they have, or if their prices are good or something like that. So try to leave like judgment language out of there, and just explain that it's an educational project, that it's a collaboration between a nonprofit, Eating with the Ecosystem, and the University of Rhode Island, and that we're interested in understanding what's local, or what seafood is available in New England markets. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Most of the markets that we've contacted have been very friendly and very nice about the whole thing. So
I'm going to repeat that for Haley, because Haley, it's a little hard to hear you. Haley was saying that Haley's been doing a lot of the calls to actually contact the market, and she said that most of the markets that she's contacted have been really friendly and are happy to have you come and collect the data. So that's good to hear. Any other questions?
Are you guys going to ever do any work about how accurate the labels are? You hear a couple of scandals and stuff like that. Are you just staying away from that topic?
That's a little bit different than kind of within our mission, Eating with the Ecosystem. Of course, we care about, honesty and everything like that, but our whole goal is to, get people to eat more local seafood. And sometimes just that the research that comes out is very negative, can be kind of confusing to people and turn people off from eating seafood in general. It's, in some cases, I feel like it can be a little misleading because, for example, like scup, for example, is a fish that has about 4 different names. And so even if it's labeled one way, maybe it can be confusing people whether or not that's the correct name. And so sometimes those mislabeling studies, I think, can be a little misleading, because they lock down on very specific kind of answers. And so even if something was labeled with another common name, sometimes it's marked as mislabeled, if that makes sense. But it's not to say that they're not correct. It's just not something that we tend to focus on.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
So for the peak times, is that just in the evening time when we should avoid visiting, or are there recommended times that you think we should head out and talk to these guys?
So it kind of depends on your market. So for a supermarket, for example, most supermarkets aren't really expecting people to buy fish like really early in the morning. So maybe they don't have like all their stuff out right away. So I like in most cases, I would think like closer to the afternoon is a little bit better. Because places will like restock, even fish markets will kind of get orders in throughout the day. And so they'll kind of restock as they go along. So if it's a market that you know that you visit on a pretty regular basis, try to think of like when that you notice that they have the most products out. If it's a weekend, a lot of times they do have things more available during the day. It just depends on kind of the time of day and what market it is. But the problem with like the rush hours, if you go to your market, maybe your market's open till 8 o'clock at night, but if you go at like 7:45 at night, it's probably not going to have the best selection because it's kind of towards the end of the day. So I think earlier before the dinner time rush is kind of better, but like maybe not right in the beginning of the day, not like 9 a.m. or something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Cool. Well, I'll stay on here for another couple minutes if anybody does come up with any additional questions. But if not, you're free to go. And if you come up with questions later or even during the Market Blitz, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll try to get back to you really quickly.
Thank you. That was a really good explanation. I appreciate it.
Great.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for
you very
joining
much.
us.